She said, I said yes only for the ring at our engagement party. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. I was pouring champagne when I heard my fiancée whisper the words that killed our future. We were in the opulent ballroom of the St. Regis, celebrating our engagement with 80 of our closest friends and family. Everything looked like an absolute fairy tale. The string quartet was playing softly in the background, crystal glasses clinked, and warm laughter filled the room. I had just proposed to Chloe 2 days prior, slipping my great-grandmother's flawless 3-carat vintage diamond ring onto her finger. The ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a revered family heirloom that had survived wars, recessions, and generations of profound love. It had recently been appraised at $85,000, but to me, its sentimental value was utterly priceless. I had slipped away to the private bar to grab us a fresh pair of drinks. The balcony doors were slightly ajar to let in the cool evening breeze. As I approached the heavy velvet curtains, I heard Chloe's voice drifting in from the terrace. She was out there with her older sister, Sarah, taking a break from the endless rounds of congratulations. I smiled, intending to step out and surprise them with the champagne, but I froze when I heard Sarah's sharp voice. Are you really going to go through with this, Chloe? A whole wedding? It seems like a massive commitment just to get out of a hole. I held my breath, the icy condensation on the champagne flutes chilling my palms. Chloe let out a long, exhausted sigh, dropping her exhausting act. I only said yes for the ring, Sarah, she replied, her tone terrifyingly cold and pragmatic. Do you know how much this rock is worth? Once I figure out the logistics of how to handle the ring without him noticing right away, I'm done. I'll stage a break-in or say I lost it at the gym. It will cover everything I owe, and then some. I just have to play the part a little longer. The champagne flutes nearly slipped from my trembling hands. My chest tightened so violently I thought I was having a heart attack. The woman I had spent the last 2 years worshiping, the woman I was preparing to build a life with, was calmly calculating the liquidation of my family's legacy. I realized I was sleeping next to a stranger who wanted to destroy me. Standing behind those velvet curtains, my mind violently forcefully rewound through the last 2 years, desperately searching for the cracks in our perfect facade. When I first met Chloe at a charity gala, she seemed like the most genuine, radiant person in the room. She was volunteering for a local animal rescue, her eyes lighting up as she talked about her passion for helping vulnerable creatures. We bonded instantly over our shared love of classic literature and quiet Sunday mornings. What do you do when the woman you love turns out to be a phantom? Over the next 24 months, she wove herself flawlessly into the fabric of my life. She cooked dinner with my mother, charmed my stoic father, and never once asked for expensive gifts or lavish vacations. She presented herself as delightfully low maintenance, a woman who valued experiences over material possessions. That was precisely why I felt so incredibly confident offering her my great-grandmother's diamond. I thought she would appreciate the profound history and the emotional weight of the heirloom. My proposal had been a meticulously planned event in the lush botanical gardens where we had our very first date. I had hired a hidden photographer and arranged for her favorite flowers to be everywhere. When I dropped to one knee and opened the velvet box, the tears that streamed down her face had looked so completely real. Her trembling hands, the way she pulled me into a desperate, passionate kiss. It all felt like the ultimate culmination of a beautiful love story. I had poured my entire soul into making her feel cherished and secure. I had trusted her entirely, completely abandoning any of the natural skepticism my best friend David always warned me to keep. I had opened the deepest, most vulnerable parts of my heart to her, believing she was my absolute soulmate. Looking back now, the perfection was entirely too seamless, like a movie set designed only to be viewed from one specific, flattering angle. Every smile, every late-night confession, and every tender touch had been meticulously engineered to build absolute, unwavering trust. But every sweet memory was just a calculated deposit into a bank of lies. The agonizing reality of the engagement party crashed back over me like a suffocating wave. I stood frozen by the balcony, forcing my lungs to expand and contract while my entire world burned to the ground. I quietly backed away from the curtains, set the 2 glasses of champagne down on a side table, and walked to the men's room to splash freezing water on my face. When I finally emerged, the party was still in full swing. Chloe was back inside, laughing brilliantly as she held up her left hand to show off the blinding diamond to a group of my relatives. The absolute agony of pasting on a smile and walking back into that room was indescribable. I had to pose for dozens of photographs, wrapping my arm around her waist and pulling her close. I had to lean down and kiss her smiling lips, feeling absolutely nothing but revulsion and a deep, terrifying emptiness where my love for her used to reside. It took every ounce of my willpower not to rip the ring right off her finger in front of everyone. Instead, I bided my time. Later in the evening, I managed to pull my best friend, David, out into the quiet hallway. David is a sharp, fiercely loyal guy who always had a slightly skeptical view of the world. "Oliver, you look like you're going to throw up," he noted immediately, his brow furrowing with deep concern. My voice shook as I relayed everything I had just overheard on the balcony. At first, David thought I had misunderstood. Bro, maybe she was joking? A really dark, weird joke with her sister? But as I repeated the exact phrasing, the cold calculation about staging a break-in to cover what she owed, the blood drained from David's face. He knew me well enough to know I wouldn't invent something so horrifying. We stood in the dim hallway, the muffled sounds of our own celebration mocking us through the walls. "Oliver, if this is true, you can't just confront her right now," David whispered intensely, gripping my shoulder. "She will deny it, gaslight you, and probably disappear with the ring by morning. You have to be smarter than her." David looked at me with cold eyes and told me to start gathering proof. The remainder of the engagement party was an agonizing blur of forced laughter and fake promises. When the night finally ended, I found myself staring at the ceiling of our shared luxury apartment, unable to close my eyes. Chloe was fast asleep beside me, breathing softly, wearing the $85,000 diamond that had doomed our relationship. As I lay there in the dark, the blinders finally fell away, and a sickening cascade of recent red flags began to make absolute sense. Looking back at the last 3 weeks, her behavior had drastically changed. Suddenly, she had developed a bizarre obsession with getting the heirloom ring properly insured. She had pestered me relentlessly for the official appraisal documents, claiming she wanted to organize our shared files. When I handed her the thick envelope detailing the stone's flawless clarity and massive valuation, I remember seeing a strange, almost hungry glint in her eyes. Furthermore, I realized she had started taking the ring off whenever she left the apartment to run errands, claiming she was terrified of getting mugged or losing it at the grocery store. I had thought she was just being incredibly responsible and protective of my family's legacy. Now, I understood she was likely taking it to be examined or quietly shopped around. She had also become incredibly guarded with her smartphone. The woman who used to leave her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter for hours now took it into the bathroom with her every time she showered. If I walked into the room unexpectedly, she would instantly swipe out of whatever application she was using, masking her panic with a sickly sweet smile. The pieces were locking into place with terrifying precision. I wasn't dealing with a loving partner with cold feet. I was sleeping next to a highly organized predator who was actively plotting a devastating financial hit. I listened to her steady breathing, feeling a cold, unfamiliar resolve hardening in my chest. I watched her sleep that night, knowing I had to cross a major boundary. It was 3 a.m, and the silence in our apartment was deafening. I carefully slid out of bed, making sure the mattress didn't creak, and silently walked around to Chloe's nightstand. Her phone was sitting there, plugged into the charger. I broke my own strict personal rules about privacy, disconnected the device, and carried it into the guest bathroom, locking the door silently behind me. My hands were shaking as the lock screen illuminated my face. She had recently changed her passcode, but I knew her well enough to guess it on the 3rd try. It was her sister Sarah's birthdate. The phone unlocked, and I immediately bypassed her usual social media apps, diving straight into her web browser. Her recent history was meticulously cleared, but she hadn't been as careful with her deleted photos. In the recently deleted folder, I found several high-resolution, extreme close-up photos of my great-grandmother's diamond from multiple different angles, perfectly lit to show the stone's precise cut. Then, I opened her messaging app. Her standard texts to Sarah were mundane, filled with wedding planning chatter and emojis. But I remembered she had recently downloaded a secure, encrypted messaging app for work. I opened it, and there was a locked thread with Sarah. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read through the messages from the past month. The confirmation was brutal and undeniable. Appraisal confirmed. One of Chloe's texts read, "It's exactly what he said it was. Moving to phase 2 on Thursday. I just need to keep him distracted." Sarah's reply was brief. "Just be careful. If he catches on, you are completely screwed with the creditors." Creditors? I stared at the bright screen, feeling a cold sweat break out on my forehead. What creditors? Chloe made a very modest salary at a boutique PR firm, and we split our living expenses proportionally. I had absolutely no idea she was in any kind of financial trouble. I kept digging and found out exactly why she needed $85,000 fast. Sitting on the cold tiles of the guest bathroom, I opened the email application on her phone. I bypassed her main inbox, which was filled with pristine wedding vendor quotes and venue brochures, and dug into her archived folders. Tucked away under a folder innocuously labeled spam receipts, I uncovered a terrifying parallel universe. The financial wreckage was staggering and absolute. There were monthly statements for 5 different high-yield credit cards, all completely maxed out. There were aggressive warning emails from a shady online personal loan company threatening immediate legal action. But the most damning document was a formal legal settlement demand from a former business partner I had never even heard of. Apparently, before we met, Chloe had been involved in a disastrous cryptocurrency scheme that collapsed, leaving her legally liable for a massive sum. I did the frantic math on a piece of toilet paper. The credit cards, the exorbitant personal loans, and the settlement demand added up to a suffocating $68,400. She had been living an incredibly elaborate double life. Every time she claimed she was going to a work retreat, she was likely meeting with desperate lawyers. The modest, financially responsible woman I thought I knew was drowning in a self-inflicted ocean of massive debt. She hadn't fallen in love with my personality, my kindness, or our shared interests. She had fallen in love with my stability, my clean credit, and the undeniable financial assets sitting on her left ring finger. The $85,000 appraisal of my great-grandmother's ring wasn't a symbol of our future. It was her exact escape velocity. It was enough to wipe out every single one of her hidden debts and leave her with a comfortable cushion of cash to start over without me. The sheer scale of the deception made me physically nauseous. I carefully took screenshots of every single financial statement and forwarded them to my own secret email address, completely covering my tracks. She wasn't planning a wedding with me. She was planning an elaborate financial heist. Thursday arrived precisely on schedule, carrying a suffocating weight of anticipation. It was Chloe's scheduled day off, a day she had cheerfully announced she would be spending at bridal boutiques looking for the perfect dress. I called my office early in the morning, faking a severe stomach bug to secure a sick day. I needed to know exactly what phase 2 entailed. As soon as she kissed my cheek, told me to feel better, and walked out the door, I opened the shared family location tracking app on my tablet. We had installed it months ago for safety during her evening runs, and in her arrogance, she had completely forgotten to disable it. I watched her digital avatar drive right past the upscale bridal district and head straight toward a rundown industrial park on the far edge of town. I threw on a baseball cap and a dark jacket, jumped into my car, and followed her path. I parked a safe distance away and watched her pull into the cracked asphalt lot of a dingy, unassuming building. The faded sign above the barred windows read, "Vance Jewelers and Appraisals." This wasn't a place you went to buy a wedding dress, and it certainly wasn't the kind of high-end establishment that handled legitimate, insured heirloom jewelry. This was the kind of shady, off-the-books shop where desperate people fenced questionable goods. I sat in my car, my pulse pounding in my ears, watching the front door. What do you do when the woman you're supposed to marry acts like a seasoned criminal? She was inside for nearly 45 minutes. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to process the absolute insanity of my reality. My fiancée was inside a shady pawn-style jewelry shop with my family's most prized possession, actively setting up the destruction of our lives. When she finally emerged, she looked incredibly relieved, slipping her sunglasses on and driving away quickly. I waited an hour in my car until she left, then walked right in. The bell above the door jingled harshly as I stepped into the dimly lit, aggressively warm shop. The air smelled of metallic dust and cheap cologne. Behind the scratched glass counter stood Mr. Vance, a balding man in his 50s with a jeweler's loop still resting on his forehead. He looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly in suspicion. I forced my posture to relax and put on my most convincing, friendly smile. "Hi there," I said smoothly. "I'm Chloe's fiancée. She was just in here about an hour ago regarding our engagement ring, and she asked me to drop by to finalize the timeline." Mr. Vance's suspicious demeanor instantly melted into a greasy, welcoming smile. "Ah, yes. The lucky groom. She told me you were fully on board with the security plan." I nodded enthusiastically, having absolutely no idea what he meant. "Of course. Can't be too careful these days." Vance chuckled, leaning against the glass counter. "Exactly. It's a very smart move. That vintage diamond is breathtaking, completely flawless. Wearing a high-quality cubic zirconia replica for travel and daily wear is incredibly common for stones of that immense value. Don't worry, my friend. I have the exact measurements and the detailed photographs she provided. I'm casting the silver band today to match the platinum original perfectly." The floor seemed to drop out from underneath me. A replica. She wasn't just planning to sell the ring down the line. She was having a cheap, visually identical fake made right now. The plan was terrifyingly brilliant. She would swap the fake onto her finger, hand the real heirloom over to a buyer to clear her massive debts, and I would be entirely oblivious, staring at a worthless piece of glass for months or even years. By the time I ever noticed, we would be married, our finances would be legally entangled, and she would have completely gotten away with it. The replica would be ready on Tuesday, giving me exactly 4 days to act. I thanked Mr. Vance, assured him we were thrilled with his discreet services, and practically ran back to my car. I drove to David's apartment in an absolute state of manic clarity. When I laid out the replica plot, David just sat on his sofa, completely speechless for a full minute. "Oliver, you have to call the police," he finally said. "This is attempted grand larceny." I shook my head adamantly. "If I go to the cops now, what proof do I actually have? A sketchy jeweler's word and some screenshots she could easily claim I doctored? If I confront her directly, she will deny everything, pack her bags, and steal the real ring before I can blink. She's backed into a $68,000 corner, David. Desperate people do unpredictable things." I realized I was fighting a rapidly ticking clock. I had to outsmart her at her own calculated game. I needed to secure my family's heirloom, but I also needed to destroy her web of lies so publicly and undeniably that she could never manipulate the narrative. We formulated a terrifyingly risky plan. I would allow her to pick up the fake ring on Tuesday. I would let her make the secret swap in our apartment. Once she foolishly believed she had won, she would hide the real diamond somewhere in her belongings until she could fence it. My job was to find the real ring, steal it back, leave the fake in its place, and let her walk into a massive, inescapable trap wearing the very glass she intended for me. We would invite both our families to a fancy dinner next weekend, framing it as a joyous celebration. There, surrounded by everyone she cared about impressing, I would drop the undeniable evidence and expose her true character. To pull this off, I had to act like the most oblivious, loving fiancé. The weekend before the planned replica pickup was pure, unadulterated psychological torture. Chloe, perhaps sensing a slight shift in my usual demeanor, went into absolute overdrive with her manipulation. She must have felt the pressure of her impending deadline with her creditors, because her behavior became incredibly erratic and overly affectionate. She prepared my favorite meals, left sweet little sticky notes on my bathroom mirror, and constantly hugged me from behind while I was trying to work. It was absolutely sickening knowing the malicious intent hiding behind her warm smiles. On Sunday evening, while we were sitting on the couch watching a movie, she casually draped her legs over my lap and traced the outline of my jaw. "You know, Oliver," she murmured softly, playing with my hair. "I was thinking about the wedding. The planning is just so stressful and expensive. What if we just skipped all the chaos? We could fly to Vegas next weekend, just the two of us, and elope. We could be husband and wife by Sunday." The audacity of her suggestion genuinely took my breath away. She wanted the legal protection of a marriage certificate immediately, locking me into her financial disaster before the bomb inevitably dropped. She wanted to secure her position as my legal spouse before she fenced my great-grandmother's diamond. My blood ran completely cold, but I forced a relaxed, loving smile onto my face. That actually sounds incredibly romantic, Chloe. I lied smoothly, staring directly into her calculating eyes. Let's definitely talk about the logistics this week. A private celebration might be exactly what we need. She beamed, visibly relaxing as she thought she had successfully manipulated me into the final stage of her trap. I kissed her forehead and promised her a future that would never actually happen. Wednesday morning arrived, the day after Chloe's scheduled pickup at Vance Jewelers. The tension in our apartment was thick enough to slice with a knife. She told me she was heading to her favorite spin class, leaving her heavy leather tote bag behind on the kitchen island. As soon as the front door clicked shut and I heard the elevator chime down the hall, I sprang into action. My heart was practically vibrating against my ribs as I unzipped her tote. I bypassed the water bottle and the towels, digging straight for her oversized velvet makeup bag at the bottom. I unzipped it, my fingers frantically pushing past compacts and brushes until I felt a small, unfamiliar lump hidden deep inside a secret zipper compartment. I pulled it out. It was a small, unmarked black velvet pouch. Holding my breath, I tipped the pouch over into my palm. Out slid the heavy, breathtaking platinum band holding my great-grandmother's 3-carat flawless diamond. The real ring. She had already made the swap. I sprinted to our bedroom and checked her jewelry box on the nightstand. Sitting right on top, gleaming brightly in the morning light, was the replica. It was an incredibly good fake. From a distance, the cubic zirconia looked identical to the priceless heirloom. I quickly took the fake ring and placed it carefully inside the black velvet pouch, returning it to the hidden zipper compartment in her makeup bag exactly as I had found it. Then, I clutched the real diamond tightly in my fist, overwhelmed by a massive wave of relief. I immediately drove to my bank, locked the family heirloom safely inside my steel safety deposit box, and pocketed the key. The asset was secured. The trap was fully loaded. Now she was carrying a worthless piece of glass, and I held all the cards. With the real diamond safely locked in a bank vault and the replica resting comfortably in her possession, the final stage of my plan commenced. I sent out formal invitations to both of my parents and Chloe's parents, along with Sarah and David, requesting their immediate presence for a very special, intimate dinner on Friday night. I booked a private, soundproof dining room at the most exclusive, expensive restaurant in the city. When Chloe asked why we were having such a fancy family gathering out of the blue, I simply smiled and told her I wanted to officially announce our beautiful decision to elope to Vegas. She was absolutely ecstatic, completely blinded by her own greed and apparent success. On Friday evening, I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early to prepare the room. I placed 5 thick, neatly bound manila folders under my chair. Inside each folder was the absolute destruction of Chloe's carefully crafted facade. The packets contained high-quality color printouts of her maxed-out credit card statements, the aggressive loan demands, and the devastating $68,000 lawsuit settlement. I had also included printed screenshots of her encrypted texts to Sarah detailing Phase 2. And finally, a neatly typed, signed statement I had easily bribed out of Mr. Vance detailing the exact specifications and timeline of the cubic zirconia replica she had commissioned. When the families arrived, the atmosphere was incredibly joyous. Chloe was glowing, wearing a stunning red dress and the cheap replica proudly on her finger. Everyone was laughing, ordering expensive wine, and celebrating our supposed eternal love. We finished our main courses, and the waiters cleared the plates. Everyone raised their glasses to us as I stood up to make my final toast. The private room quieted down as I tapped my fork against my crystal wine glass. I looked around the table, making brief eye contact with my deeply proud parents, then with Chloe's smiling mother and father. Finally, my gaze locked onto Chloe, who was beaming up at me with total, manufactured adoration. I want to propose a toast. I began, my voice steady and unervingly calm. To honesty, to family, and to seeing things for what they truly are. I reached under my chair, grabbed the stack of manila folders, and began passing them around the table. One for my dad, one for her dad, one for Sarah, and one for David. I didn't give one to Chloe. "Oliver, sweetheart, what is all this?" her mother asked. adjusting her reading glasses with a confused chuckle. It's a comprehensive overview of the woman I almost married, I replied coldly. Please, open them. The silence in the room became incredibly heavy as the folders were flipped open. I slowly unraveled the entire plot out loud. I detailed the suffocating $68,000 debt she had hidden from me. I read aloud the exact encrypted text she had sent to her sister, who was now shrinking into her chair, turning completely pale. I explained how she viewed my family's priceless heirloom strictly as a financial bailout. Chloe let out a high-pitched, nervous laugh. Oliver, stop. What is this horrible joke? You're scaring everyone, she pleaded, reaching out to touch my arm. I stepped back, avoiding her touch as if she were toxic. I want you to look closely at your hand, Chloe, I commanded, my voice echoing in the silent room. Take a really good look at the ring you're wearing to pay off your secret lawsuits. The color completely drained from her face when she realized the diamond was fake. Absolute, unmitigated chaos erupted in the private dining room. Chloe stared down at the shiny cubic zirconia on her finger, realizing the horrifying truth. She hadn't swapped the real ring to safety. I had swapped her fake right back to her. Her father slammed his folder shut, his face purple with rage. $68,000, Chloe? A lawsuit from that crypto scam. He roared, the disappointment radiating from him. My mother sat frozen, tears of absolute shock welling in her eyes as my father put a protective arm around her. Sarah tried to stammer out a pathetic defense, claiming the texts were taken out of context, but David immediately shut her down, pointing directly to the printed proof. Chloe finally snapped. The sweet, innocent facade completely shattered. She sprang up from her chair, her face contorted in vicious, ugly panic. Where is it? She screamed, lunging across the table and grabbing the lapels of my suit jacket. Where is the real ring, Oliver? It was a gift. You gave it to me. It belongs to me legally. I gently but firmly detached her trembling hands from my chest. It belongs to my family, I stated with absolute, icy conviction. And it's currently sitting in a highly secure bank vault where a thief like you can never touch it again. The wedding is canceled. The relationship is permanently over. You can keep the cheap glass. Consider it a parting gift. I turned to her horrified parents, apologized sincerely for ruining their Friday evening, and walked toward the heavy oak door. David flanked me silently, shooting one last disgusted look at Sarah. Chloe collapsed back into her chair, sobbing hysterically as her father began demanding answers she couldn't possibly fabricate. I left her weeping over a piece of cut glass in a silent room. The aftermath of that explosive dinner was incredibly messy, but remarkably swift. Her family was completely devastated and humiliated by her actions. Her father flatly refused to bail her out of her massive debt, demanding she face the legal consequences of her failed business ventures and shopping addictions on her own. I heard through mutual friends that she was forced to move out of the city and back into her childhood bedroom, taking on a second job to avoid bankruptcy. I spent the next few months meticulously untangling our lives, breaking our lease, and sorting through the emotional wreckage of loving an absolute illusion. The betrayal cut incredibly deep, and I spent hours in professional therapy trying to understand how I had been so thoroughly manipulated by a beautiful smile and a series of shared hobbies. It took a long time to forgive myself for ignoring the subtle warning signs in the beginning, the tiny moments of selfishness I had brushed off in the name of love. But mostly, I feel an overwhelming, profound sense of gratitude. By accidentally overhearing that singular, cruel conversation on the balcony at our engagement party, I had dodged a literal bullet that would have completely destroyed my financial and emotional future. I still have my great-grandmother's diamonds securely locked away, waiting for a woman who will actually value the history and the heart behind the stone, rather than its appraisal value. If my story serves as a warning to anyone out there, let it be this. Never ignore your gut instincts just because the picture looks incredibly pretty from the outside. Always verify the truth. True love shouldn't require an appraisal, and a real partner never plots your ruin.